A third person has now been suspended from GB News. This is the Reverend Calvin Robinson, who's been taken off air because he posted comments supporting Dan Wootton, who has already been suspended along with Lawrence Fox. Now, Robinson is a deacon in the Free Church of England, and he said that Wootton was being targeted by careerist, ambitious people who are currently gunning for his job. And he also said that the GB people, the bosses, i.e. Angelos Frangopoulos, was afraid of Ofcom, afraid of the woke mob, afraid they're going to run out of money unless they manage to sort this advertising problem out. And he's announced on Twitter that he's been suspended from GB News. And this all comes back to Lawrence Fox talking disparagingly about Anna Evans. Who would want to shag that? It's demeaning, it's abusive, it's... I've thought a few times about whether or not I should repeat the comment, but I've thought in the end, really, it's better to hear what was said rather than to be evasive and prudish about it. Frangopoulos has said that he is appalled by Fox's remarks. There have been 7,300 complaints to Ofcom, or at least there were until last night. There's probably been more since then. GB News has set out to challenge mainstream media, and a lot of the Ofcom ethos is about a form of media which existed 20 years ago and it hasn't been updated now. Ofcom thinks this is a good thing. I think it's an appalling thing. And as a result, when you approach Ofcom or when Ofcom is asked for an opinion, it doesn't give one. And so when the Culture Secretary and the committee for the DCMS are equally not forthcoming, you turn to Ofcom, and Ofcom is useless. So we've got these three institutions that are managing our media, and all of them are out of touch. And I think Ofcom needs to be redefined. I think the digital culture, media and sport needs to be redefined. In fact, I think it needs to be split up so that sport is managed by a different minister. But at the moment we've got digital and media and culture managed by different people. We've got Lucy Fraser managing the bulk of the stuff, and Michelle Donnellan, who was the culture secretary, managing the digital bit, so she can steer through the online safety bill, this sort of charter for snooping, which is itself fraught with problems. Robinson has said these people are worse than the woke mob because the vultures are giving the mob ammunition and essentially escalating the channel's demise. GB News is more than a job. It's certainly more than a chance to be on the telly. It's a mission, an opportunity to shift the dial in public discourse, to have the conversations the shills on other channels cannot or will not have. We must do all we can to avoid GB News becoming just another MSM outlet, which it will if we let it. No, he's wrong. He's wrong. There is room for a channel which fosters debate, a channel which simply wishes to be an echo chamber for a particular brand of right-wing pomposity. Well, that is certainly the direction that GB News is currently going, but it isn't the way that it needed to be, and certainly not with Andrew Neil initially at the helm. It didn't need to have that identity, and I think there's a strong case to be made for a form of media which looks at things with intelligent, informed debate, which is prepared to rock the boat, which is prepared to be edgy, but which also is prepared to embrace a range of opinions. Rather like we have a series of magazines which do exactly that: The Spectator, The New Statesman, Private Eye, These are edgy, informed, interesting magazines, and there is room for that as well as the mainstream news. The problem with the mainstream news is very simple. It's bland, and it's bland because it doesn't want to cause offence, and it wants to be balanced. In being balanced, sometimes the BBC, in fact, ends up promoting completely wacky and very minority edged interests. Like, for example, during the coronation, suddenly you have the voice of the anti-monarchists, who are very small and very it's very much a niche market, but because of the BBC's commitment to balance, suddenly they get a voice. The same thing with Brexit. In fact, that's probably what propelled Brexit to such importance. And I think there's room for programs which are not balanced in that sense, as long as we know what they are. But not to be balanced is not necessarily to be abusive, and Fox overstepped that mark. At the same time, not to be balanced is it requires a level of professionalism, and I think it's not the fact that Nadine Dorries and the forgettable one, Lee Anderson, Esther McVey, Jacob Rees-Mogg. It's not the fact that they are biased, which is the problem. It's the fact that they've already got a public office in Parliament, and having a second public office on the back of what they're doing in Parliament. If Esther McVey is a slightly odd one, because Esther McVey was already a television journalist before she became an MP, and I think out of the range of MPs who are currently on niche television, Esther McVey is the least interesting. Jacob Rees-Mogg, I think, is the most interesting and the most successful, and congratulations to Jacob Rees-Mogg yesterday for receiving his knighthood from the Princess Royal. That I think must have been a memorable and a wonderful occasion. And we should acknowledge all these things. But as for Calvin Robinson, if you don't know who he is, he hosts a religious current affairs program on GBNews on a Friday. And he said, if he falls, we all fall. That's if Dan Wootton falls, we all... He's wrong. He's completely wrong. Dan Wootton is not the heart of GB News. GB News can survive without Dan Wootton. GB News would survive better without Dan Wootton. What Fox said should not have been broadcast. I have every suspicion. I've been told that he was primed, but I haven't seen the evidence that he was primed. But I know that, having had experience of television, I know that is almost certainly likely. He would have been produced, and what he said would not have been off the cuff. And it should have been properly challenged by Wootton. It wasn't. There's good reason, I think, for both Wootton and for Fox to be suspended. I think the chances of Fox getting back on air are very, very slight. The chances of Wootton getting back on air, oddly, I think, are much higher. But I must say, I think that there is every chance that Wootton was. This was simply the last straw, and that that GB News was looking for an opportunity. I think it would be interesting to see how this one plays out. Yeah. And Robinson think we could find somebody else to talk about religion.